The British believed they had won. 7 days after D-Day, the 7th Armored Division, the famed Desert Rats, rolled into the French town of Villers-Bocage without resistance. No German defenders, no gunfire, no sign of a fight. Just empty streets, abandoned buildings, and the impression that the road to Caen might finally be open. Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Cranley, leading the advance, halted his column for tea, reconnaissance, and a short pause. It seemed routine. Along Route Nationale 175, British tanks, half-tracks, Bren carriers, and supply vehicles stretched in a long, crowded line through a narrow street barely wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass. Crews dismounted to smoke, talk, and enjoy what looked like the easiest push since the Normandy landings. No one noticed the Tiger. Hidden behind a hedgerow roughly 200 meters away, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann sat inside his Tiger I and watched the entire British column. Through his optics, he counted vehicle after vehicle. Cromwells, Sherman Fireflies, carriers, trucks, all halted, all exposed, all showing him broadside targets. His gunner reportedly muttered that it looked like an entire battalion. Doctrine said they should report it and wait. A single tank was not supposed to attack a superior force. A Tiger operating alone against an entire armored column was not boldness, it was madness. But Wittmann saw what doctrine did not. The British weren't deployed for battle. They were trapped. Their column was compressed into a single narrow street. They could not turn around quickly. They could not fan out. They could not establish firing positions. If he struck fast enough, the enemy's numerical advantage would become meaningless. Every principle of armored warfare warned against it. Wittmann attacked anyway. Driver, full speed. Gunner, engage the lead tank on my command. What followed over the next 15 minutes became one of the most famous and controversial single-tank actions of the Second World War. One German commander, acting without support, shattered a British advance, destroyed or disabled a remarkable number of vehicles, and turned what looked like a breakthrough into a disaster. This is the story of Michael Wittmann at Villers-Bocage. 3 years earlier, Wittmann had been unremarkable. Born in Bavaria in 1914, he joined the German army in 1934, first serving in infantry before transferring into armored units. He was not born into a military family, nor did he arrive with a reputation for brilliance. He was a farmer's son who learned to drive trucks and happened to discover an unusual talent for armored combat. By 1940, he was commanding a Stug 3 during the campaign in France. He was competent and dependable, but not yet exceptional. The Eastern Front changed that. Operation Barbarossa transformed tank warfare into something vast, fast, and brutally unforgiving. In the wide open spaces of Ukraine and Russia, range estimation, gunnery, and battlefield timing mattered enormously. Soviet armor often attacked in mass, but early war Soviet coordination was weak. German crews, though often badly outnumbered, could destroy enemy tanks from distances at which Soviet return fire was ineffective. Wittmann proved unusually gifted in exactly those conditions. He developed a reputation for estimating range with uncanny accuracy and hitting moving targets with first-round precision. By early 1943, he had accumulated dozens of kills, impressive but still not legendary. Then he was transferred to Schwere SS Panzerabteilung 101 and given command of a Tiger I. The Tiger was one of the most feared tanks on the battlefield. Its 88mm KWK-36 could destroy Allied armor at long range. Its frontal armor was thick enough to shrug off many common anti-tank weapons under normal combat conditions. Against British and American tanks in 1943 and early 1944, a Tiger could dominate a fight if it engaged from favorable ground. But the Tiger also had serious flaws. It was heavy, slow, mechanically temperamental, and consumed huge amounts of fuel. Germany built only a limited number of them, and German doctrine treated them as breakthrough weapons to be concentrated at decisive points with support from infantry, artillery, and other armor. They were not meant to fight alone. On the Eastern Front in early 1944, Whitman's records surged. Operating near Zhytomyr and elsewhere in Ukraine, he accumulated an extraordinary tally of Soviet tank kills. His style was methodical. He identified the enemy early, engaged from the longest favorable range, used terrain to preserve his advantages, and withdrew before he could be flanked. He fought like a sniper in armor, not a gambler in a duel. By May 1944, he had become one of Germany's most celebrated tank commanders, decorated and heavily publicized. Then the Allies landed in Normandy. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces stormed the beaches. Whitman's battalion was rushed to France as part of Germany's effort to contain the invasion. Their task was clear: prevent the Allies from breaking out of the beachhead and advancing inland towards vital objectives such as Caen. By June 12th, British armor had advanced farther and faster than many German commanders expected. Villers-Bocage, a market town on the road network west of Caen, suddenly became critical. If British armor pushed through and exploited the opening, they could threaten German positions from the flank and unravel the defense. The British 7th Armoured Division was exactly the formation expected to do it. Veteran, confident, and aggressive, the Desert Rats had built their reputation in North Africa. On paper, they had all the momentum. But momentum created vulnerability. The British advance had moved faster than its support. Infantry screens were thin or absent. Reconnaissance had not properly secured the flanks. Artillery was not ideally placed to cover the lead elements. Tanks and support vehicles had pushed ahead to capitalize on success, leaving themselves exposed if a determined enemy appeared at the right place and time. On the morning of June 13, Whitman moved into a position overlooking the main road through Villers-Bocage. What he saw was almost unbelievable. An entire British armored column halted in the open, packed into a narrow road, with crews relaxed and many soldiers dismounted. He radioed the sighting back and requested permission to engage. The answer was no. He was ordered to observe and wait for support from the rest of the battalion. Whitman acknowledged the order, but the longer he watched, the clearer the danger became. Every minute gave the British more time to reorganize, post security, disperse into better positions, and eliminate the extraordinary opportunity sitting in front of him. He decided not to wait. The Tiger lurched forward out of concealment and into full view of the British column. For a few seconds, confusion reigned. Some British troops reportedly did not react immediately. Then Whitman fired. His first shot destroyed the lead British tank, blocking movement at the head of the column. Within seconds, he fired again, hitting another vehicle. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. In a confined street, the destruction of lead vehicles turned the road into a trap. Tanks behind them could not maneuver freely. Vehicles jammed together. Command and control collapsed almost at once. Whitman drove directly into the column, firing as he advanced. At such close range, the Tiger's gun was devastating. Cromwell's and other vehicles were struck before crews could fully react. British commanders shouted orders. Drivers tried to reverse. Turrets turned desperately toward the threat, but the column's formation, which had been efficient for road movement, was disastrous under sudden attack. A Sherman Firefly, one of the few British tanks whose 17-pounder gun posed a serious threat to a Tiger, attempted to respond. In the chaos and close quarters, it either failed to get a decisive shot or was quickly knocked out before it could change the outcome. Around him, half-tracks, carriers, and trucks were also destroyed or abandoned. Whitman's advantage was not just firepower, it was tempo. He struck faster than the British could think. He kept moving, never allowing the enemy to settle into a coherent defense. He prioritized targets that would multiply confusion, lead vehicles, tanks attempting to reposition, any threat capable of damaging the Tiger. In the cramped streets of Villers-Bocage, numbers counted less than initiative, and Whitman had all of it. By the time he reached the town center, the British advance had disintegrated into panic. Burning vehicles blocked the road, infantry scattered for cover, crews abandoned damaged tanks. Commanders, unable to grasp the scale of what was happening, initially believed they were under attack by a larger German force. That confusion is one of the most important parts of the story. The sheer violence and speed of the assault made it difficult for British officers to believe they were facing a single tank. Later reports and recollections often describe the event in terms that suggest a much larger coordinated ambush. That alone tells you how shocking Whitman's attack was. But even the most aggressive attack has limits. As the minutes passed, British troops began recovering from the initial shock. Anti-tank teams started organizing in buildings and side streets. The Tiger, for all its armor, was not invulnerable at close range in an urban environment. Infantry with anti-tank weapons could damage tracks, optics, engine components, or force the crew into a vulnerable position. At some point, Whitman recognized that the conditions that had made the attack possible were beginning to change. He had inflicted immense damage and broken the British column's offensive power. Staying longer risked trading a brilliant tactical success for a trapped and disabled Tiger. So he withdrew. Firing as he pulled back, Whitman drove out of Villers-Bocage and rejoined German lines. In roughly 15 minutes, he had helped turn a British advance into a burning wreckage of tanks, carriers, and support vehicles. The exact number of vehicles destroyed directly by Whitman remains debated by historians, as does the precise sequence of some engagements inside the town. But there's no dispute about the central fact. His action caused a tactical shock of enormous magnitude. German reinforcements soon arrived, and the situation worsened for the British. What had begun as an unopposed entry into a key town became a dangerous and confused fight against regrouping German forces. Fearing encirclement and recognizing the collapse of the original momentum, British commanders eventually withdrew. The immediate result was a German tactical victory. The broader British advance towards Caen was disrupted. A promising exploitation had been blunted. For German propaganda, the event was a gift. Whitman was celebrated as the embodiment of boldness, skill, and German armored superiority. He was promoted, decorated further, and turned into a symbol. And yet, Villers-Bocage mattered as much for what it revealed about British mistakes as for what it revealed about Whitman. Post-battle analysis showed three glaring British failures. First, reconnaissance had been inadequate. The column had moved as if the road ahead were secure, without sufficient flank protection or battlefield awareness. Second, too much of the force had been concentrated along one narrow route, creating perfect conditions for blockage and chaos. Third, the halt in a vulnerable position without full defensive readiness left crews exposed at the worst possible moment. Whitman recognized all of this instantly. That is what separates mere aggression from tactical brilliance. He did not attack just because he was reckless. He attacked because he saw a fleeting situation in which conventional rules no longer applied. Under normal conditions, one tank attacking a superior force would be suicidal, but these were not normal conditions. The enemy was stationary, compressed, unwarned, and unprepared. Whitman also executed the attack with discipline. He did not pause to duel unnecessarily. He maintained motion. He selected targets that maximized confusion, and, critically, he withdrew before British resistance fully consolidated. A lesser commander might have lingered for more destruction and lost everything. Whitman understood that a tactical victory is complete the moment the enemy's offensive capability collapses. The psychological effect on the British was severe. Villers-Bocage became a cautionary lesson in overconfidence, especially in confined terrain. Armored crews and officers who had once advanced boldly now had fresh reason to fear ambush, especially in towns, roads bordered by hedgerows, and narrow approaches where maneuver was restricted. German propagandists exploited the event immediately. Newspapers, military bulletins, and radio used Whitman's attack to reinforce the myth of German tactical and technological superiority. At a time when Germany's strategic situation was deteriorating, stories like Villers-Bocage were meant to show that elite German soldiers could still achieve miracles. But propaganda could not alter the larger war. That is one of the central truths of this story. Villers-Bocage was a stunning tactical success, but it did not change the strategic balance in Normandy. The Allies retained overwhelming advantages in manpower, logistics, industry, artillery, and air power. British and American forces adapted. They improved their caution, coordination, and anti-tank methods. German local victories could inflict painful delays, but they could not reverse the overall direction of the campaign. Whitman continued to fight through the summer of 1944. He added to his tally and remained one of Germany's most effective tank commanders. But conditions were worsening for every German armored unit in France. Allied aircraft roamed the skies, fuel shortages deepened, artillery became more punishing, and Allied tank crews learned, slowly but decisively, how to counter German heavy armor with better positioning, numbers, and improved guns such as the British 17-pounder. On August 8, 1944, during fighting south of Caen, Whitman's Tiger was destroyed. The precise details remain disputed. Different accounts attribute the fatal hit to British Fireflies, anti-tank guns, or even air attack. What is certain is that the tank suffered a catastrophic ammunition explosion. The turret was blown off. Whitman and his crew were killed instantly. He was 30 years old. His death ended the career of one of the most effective tank commanders of the war, but it also underscored the limit of individual excellence in industrial conflict. A brilliant commander could dominate one engagement or several. He could terrify opponents and become a legend, but he could not save a collapsing war effort starved of fuel, aircraft, replacements, and industrial parity. That is why Whitman remains such a compelling and controversial figure. From a military perspective, Villers-Bocage is studied as a masterclass in exploiting enemy mistakes. Armor schools and historians return to it repeatedly because it captures timeless principles: the value of reconnaissance, the danger of road-bound columns, the importance of tempo, the power of decisive initiative, and the need to know exactly when to stop. From a moral and historical perspective, the story is more complicated. Whitman served in the Waffen-SS, an organization deeply implicated in the crimes of the Nazi regime. Even if one studies him strictly as a tactician, that context cannot be ignored. His battlefield skill is real, so is the nature of the system he fought for. Any serious treatment of his legacy has to hold both truths at once. And that may be the final reason Villers-Bocage still matters. It is not simply a story about a great tank ace, it is a story about how wars are fought at different levels at once. On the tactical level, one man's speed, judgment, and audacity can produce astonishing results. On the strategic level, even astonishing results may change very little. Whitman's charge at Villers-Bocage demonstrated the maximum effect of individual battlefield genius. One commander, one crew, one tank, one fleeting opportunity. In minutes, they shattered a column and stalled an advance. It was as dramatic a local success as armored warfare could produce. And still, it was not enough. The British regrouped. The Allies continued forward. Germany kept losing ground. Whitman himself was dead less than 2 months later. The war rolled on towards its inevitable conclusion. So why do we still study those 15 minutes? Because footnotes can teach as much as headlines. Because a single action, when stripped of myth and propaganda, can reveal the essence of combat: awareness, timing, discipline, aggression, and the terrible price of error. And because Villers-Bocage shows how quickly confidence can become catastrophe when doctrine is ignored and vulnerability goes unseen. And because for 15 extraordinary minutes on June 13, 1944, Michael Whitman saw an impossible opportunity and took it. The British thought they had already won. They were wrong.